and welcome to episode number 1 of the Morning Pitt. I guess you call it episode 2, depending on how you want to count yesterday when we did the weekend recap. I mean, I still called that a weekend recap, even though it really was kind of the first episode of the Morning Pitt. And going forward, each of our Monday morning episodes of the Morning Pitt are going to be kind of a weekend recap anyway. Even if we call it the Morning Pitt, we might call it the Morning Pitt Weekend Recap. So I could have called yesterday's episode the Morning Pitt Weekend Recap. But I don't want to give away the announcement, the surprise announcement, or I don't want to say surprise, it's not that big of a deal, but I didn't want to give away the announcement that we were starting this new show, The Morning Pitt. I didn't want to give that away right off the top. I sort of announced that late in the show. So this is either episode 1 or episode 2, however you want to look at it. The Morning Pitt, our new a new addition to our coverage here at Panther-Lair.com, where every morning, Monday through Friday, kind of give you a primer, a start to the day, a pit start to the day, the main topics, the things people are going to be talking about today, whether it's news, something that happened in the last 24 hours, or anything you need to be caught up on or ready for, storylines, whatever's going on in Pitt sports, or whatever I think you should know about or be thinking about today. That's what we're going to talk about here on the Morning Pitt. It'll be on our YouTube channel, of course, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, where you can help us out by subscribing and also liking this video, of course. Those are two good things to help us get exposure for these projects that we're working on. And then we'll also have it available on the podcast feed on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and wherever else you get your podcasts that we might send it to. And if there's somewhere that you listen to podcasts and we don't have the Panther-Lair show there, you can always reach out to me on email or direct message on Twitter, what have you, and say, hey, put your podcast on this hosting service because we'd like to listen to it there. So we can always look into doing that. But yeah, it's just a morning, get you going. You know, it's 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 10 minutes, however long it takes just to talk about whatever topics there are to cover. And something to just sort of get you ready for the day, kind of a reliable daily Pitt show. And so here we are, episode 1, maybe 2, depending on how you look at it. And of course, it is the last week of training camp right now. We talked a lot about that on the weekend recap yesterday, that it's the final week of training camp. And as you dive into it and get closer and closer to the start of the season with the September 1st backyard brawl kickoff at Acrisure Stadium against West Virginia, we're now 9 days away from that game. And so you're really kind of honing in on turning the focus from training camp into the regular season. But before we get there, I thought this week, as they kind of wrap up the final week of training camp here, we'll really just recap what we've seen, what we've learned, what has happened over the past 4 weeks of training camp, 3.5 weeks, whatever it works out to. And I thought we'd kind of go position by position. So, I mean, you've got, you start, I think, at the top. And we're starting today with the quarterbacks, the running backs, and the receivers. And when you look at the quarterback position, I mean, so first of all, I said it on the weekend recap yesterday that I thought Pat Narduzzi would announce a starting quarterback this week. I said he would either do it, that he had 3 media availabilities, and he would do it at one of those 3, Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday. Well, he didn't do it on Monday, and they canceled the media availability on Tuesday, so I guess I'm narrowing it down to Thursday, unless he decides to announce it at the kickoff luncheon on Friday. So we missed on that, at least for the first 2 out of, I said there were 3 possibilities, and 2 of them have already been eliminated. So good work by me. Still think it's Kedon Slovis. I still think it's Kedon Slovis as the guy who's going to win the starting job. I think it's always been Kedon Slovis. It's Toretto, Brian. It was always Toretto. It's Slovis, Brian. It's always been Slovis. And that's just, by nature of the thing. I mean, he was recruited to Pitt to be the starter. He came to Pitt to be the starter, and he's performed like the starter. And that's not to say that Nick Patty hasn't. That's not to say that Nick Patty has not been good in training camp and spring camp. That's not to say that Nick Patty can't move the offense, because I very much believe that he can. Kedon Slovis is better. And this is a situation, with Kedon Slovis of not... I mean, he's a transfer, obviously. And nowadays, what... I was going to say he's not your average transfer, but the reality is transfers are, run the gamut of experience and success. I mean, guys, could win a major national award as the best player at their position in the country and still end up transferring and going somewhere else. So, you don't say, well, guys with this kind of success don't transfer, because they do. But when you look at Keaton Slovis, and obviously we know there were extenuating circumstances behind his decision to transfer out of USC, but this is a guy who's coming into Pitt with almost 1,000 pass attempts in his career, close to 70% completions, and 58 touchdown passes. And that's a remarkable number. And we know the success he had at USC. We know the Pac-12 Offensive Freshman of the Year and All-Conference player in 2020. And we know the circumstances of 2021, where he kind of goes back and forth with Jackson Dart, has some injuries, ultimately loses the job, and then USC hires Lincoln Riley and he brings him Caleb Williams anyway, so it kind of doesn't matter if he had held on to the job against Jackson Dart or not. He goes looking for greener pastures, or at least looking for a different opportunity, maybe what he perceived to be a better opportunity. And if this all works out, if Keaton Slovis, like I say, I expect him to be named the starter, and I think this week, and I think he'll be Pitt's starting quarterback all season. And if it all works out where Slovis is really good, if he has a really good season, we're going to, at some point, we will outline this, sort of the steps of how Pitt ended up in this situation. And you go back to, the COVID year, the NCAA's COVID exemption that allowed Kenny Pickett to return for 2021. Because if Kenny Pickett doesn't come back in 2021 and have the season he had, which led to Pitt having the season Pitt led, I don't know that Keaton Slovis decides to transfer to Pitt. I think it's really, he came to Pitt because he saw what Kenny Pickett did at Pitt, and he saw the kind of success that Pitt had. Of going 11-3 and winning the ACC championship. And those things don't happen without Kenny Pickett, without the COVID exemption, without him getting that extra year. Now, you say what you want about the COVID exemption. The reality is he should have been able to take a red shirt for 2017. They didn't put that rule in, the 4-game rule, until the next year, I believe. And so, it's not just the COVID exemption, but it kind of is. And that played a pretty big part in Pickett. That was why he was able to come back and play again, why he was, and then ultimately have the success he had, which led to Keaton Slovis coming to Pitt. They've brought in transfer quarterbacks in the past. Max Brown came in. Joey Yellen came in. You can count Ricky Town if you want. Jeff George Jr. And some of those guys were brought in to be the starter, and other guys were not brought in to be the starter. And you can talk about the levels of success that they had or didn't have. I think Keaton Slovis is unique from all of those guys. I really do. I think he has more of a track record. He has a more history of success. And I think he's got really good physical tools to excel in this offense with Frank Signetti and the players that he has around him, the playmakers that he has around him, those of which we'll talk about in a minute. And then, of course, behind him, I can't say enough good things about Nick Patty. I think Nick Patty is going to be a great backup for Pitt. And when he's called upon to play, I think he'll do a really good job. But I think Slovis gives them a better chance to win. I think there's more upside there. So when you're setting your depth chart, you're planning out your 2 deep, your projected 2 deep, which obviously we'll do as the season gets closer, maybe even this Friday, we'll see. That might be my prediction in the 3-2-1 column on Friday on Panther-Lair.com. If you're predicting the 2 deep, I think you predict Patty, or you predict Slovis, and then Patty. No oars, first team and second team. Running back, wouldn't be surprised if you see a few oars there, and maybe all season. Look, the ideal scenario for Pitt is that Izzy Abanikanda is the starting running back, that he plays 14, 15, 16 games, however many games Pitt is going to play this year, 12, 13, on and on, that he doesn't miss any significant time with injury, that he's not limited in his carries at any point during the season, and he just goes off because he is capable of going off. He's talented enough to go off. He is that kind of a player. But he's been limited at times. He had 1 carry against Western Michigan last year. He had 9 carries against Clemson. He had 6 carries against Miami. He had 3 carries against Virginia. He had less than 10 carries against Wake Forest. He had 5 carries against Michigan State. Some of those were usage situations where the decision was made to deploy the running backs in different ways. And some of those, I think, were a result of Abanikanda getting hurt. And the ultimate result is that he's limited to 123 carries. he needs to be a 200 carry guy. He needs to be healthy enough for 200 carries, and they need to commit to him for 200 carries. And if they do, he'll have 1,000 yards and maybe more. When you look at his stats from last season, the Tennessee game, he goes 12 for 43, less than 4 yards per carry. But New Hampshire, Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech, Clemson, Miami, Duke, North Carolina, I'm just reading down the stats here, Virginia, Wake Forest, all better than 4 yards per carry. And actually, out of those, you can look at New Hampshire, Virginia Tech, Clemson, Duke, North Carolina, Virginia, and Wake Forest. He averaged better than 5 yards per carry, and a bunch of those he averaged better than 6 yards per carry. He's a playmaker. You can watch the kickoff return against Virginia to see what kind of speed he has and his ability to break plays and make big plays. This is a big-time running back that Pitt has right now. He's one of their best offensive weapons, in my opinion. I think you look at him as, I think, the most dynamic running back on the roster, the most complete all-around package of running backs that they have on the roster, and a guy who, when he's at his best, I think reminds you of Le'Veon Bell at his best. Forget about the way things ended with Le'Veon Bell in Pittsburgh. Forget about any of those negatives that we associate with Le'Veon Bell. Think about when he was at his best, and Izzy Abanikanda has a similar skill set. He has that kind of ability. I think he can really be that good. But he's got to stay on the field. Now, if he doesn't stay on the field, and when they want to give him a rest, I think Rodney Hammond can be an absolute stud. I think Rodney Hammond can be almost as good as Abanikanda, to be honest. I really do. Because he showed flashes. Now, Andre Powell said something interesting last week when he said that, Rodney did a good job coming in late in the game when the other team was worn down and he was fresh and he was able to run around them. I think he's better than that. I think he deserves better than that and a little bit more credit for his natural ability. I think Abanikanda, my prediction is Abanikanda is going to have a huge year this year, go to the NFL, and Hammond will have a huge year next year. Will there be an or starter there with Hammond and Abanikanda? Probably with Abanikanda listed first, it's very possible. I wouldn't be surprised. They love their ors, particularly at running back, and particularly where you have this 3, 4, 5-headed monster that they seem to be developing. Because in addition to Abanikanda and Hammond, you've got Vincent Davis, the senior that everyone loves to hate, but who does a pretty good job in his role. And as other players have developed around him, he's been able to settle into a rather specific role that I think is well suited for him. You have Daniel Carter, who emerged this spring as a fullback who can take some carries at tailback. He can catch passes out of the backfield. He can take fullback dive handoffs and run those kind of plays, and I think do well at them, particularly around the goal line. And then Sibo Flemisser, who came in as a transfer from Notre Dame, who, I'm going to be honest, I didn't have real high expectations for. And I'm still, the jury's out. I'm still waiting to see after he didn't really do all that much at Notre Dame. But boy, the reviews have been rave for him throughout training camp. In the last week, Andre Powell talked him up a lot. Pat Narduzzi talked him up a lot last week. Some of the other players have talked him up a lot. And there's a feeling that he may be a legit piece of this running back rotation. Now, if it's up to me, and it's not, I'm giving Izzy Abanikanda the bulk of the carries. He's getting 17, 18, 20 carries a game. And he's going to go out there and lead the way. And then behind, and then I'm working the other guys in however we can fit them in, whatever seems to work best. Now, probably more likely is Abanikanda is going to be at 15 carries or less each game, and you're going to see those other guys worked in, for a series here, series there, maybe Hammond for a few, Flemister for a few, maybe Hammond is saved to be the hammer at the end of the game. Hammond the hammer, that works out almost too perfectly. But the end result, I think, should be that a healthy Izzy Abanikanda is this team's leading rusher and clear workhorse back, or clear number one back throughout the season, and ultimately one of the best backs in the ACC because I think he's got the talent level to be there. How's the depth chart going to look when it comes out on next Monday, which is 29th? They'll release their first official depth chart of the season. My guess is a bunch of ors. And they might list all 5 guys as ors. Or maybe they'll go Abanikanda and then ors with Hammond or Vincent Davis or Sebo Flemister, and then list Daniel Carter separately at fullback or something like that. I wouldn't be surprised by any of those outcomes, but I'm guessing there will be ors involved at the running back position on the official depth chart. But it's a strong group. I mean, I think it's a really good group that if they truly are committed to establishing a little more balance in this offense, I think they have the backs to do it. And then at wide receiver, I think what I think about this group. What I keep saying and what I've said all offseason is I can't sit here and say they're better than they were last year. Not when you take the Biletnikoff Award winner, one of the best wide receivers in school history, arguably number 2, arguably the second best receiver in school history. When you take that off the roster, when you take a guy like him off the roster, I can't sit here and say the group is better now. And I'm not going to say, I'm not even inclined. This isn't me sort of trying to hide the fact that I think they're going to be better now than they were a year ago. I can't say that because Jordan Addison was just that special. But what I can say is Konate Mumpfield is going to be a stud. Bub Means is going to be a monster. Jalen Barden has been really impressive this camp and surging. And he's a guy I've been high on for the last 2 years. And I think he's really going to get his opportunity now. I think Jared Wayne is great at being Jared Wayne, and that's a very important thing to have on your team. I think most teams would like to have a Jared Wayne. Maybe not as their number one receiver, but a guy who is probably every week going to make a big catch for you. A key play, either a third down or a key possession move, something like that. I think he's just really good in that role. And then Jaden Bradley. It's so hard with Jalen Barden and Jaden Bradley. One of the coaches or one of the players the other day said JB and then specified which JB they were referring to. Although I've heard them say called Jalen Barden Ben 10 because he's got that, he wears number 10. But Jaden Bradley, is another guy who adds a lot of size to the receiver room. I think if you keep those 5 guys healthy, Mumpfield, Wayne, Means, Barden, and Bradley, you got a great receiving core. They can really go out and do a lot for you and do a lot of different things. I think they present a lot of different challenges for a defense, whether it's speed, size, route running, deep threats, short stuff, screens. They can't all do all of those things. But the group as a whole can do all of those things and present different kind of threats. I think you are going to have to be really good to shut Konate Mumpfield down just based on his route running, how sharp he is, how crisp he is, and then he's got the physical tools. He's not just a technician. He's got the physical tools to, when you make a mistake and he takes advantage of it with his routes, it's going to turn into a big play. And I think that's going to happen every week. Maybe a couple times a week in different situations. I think Bub Means is going to be a real threat down the field. I think Jaden Bradley's going to have a chance to make some contested catches. He's got to keep his focus, but I think he's going to have a chance to use his size to get over guys and make big catches. I think Jalen Barden is going to make a lot of plays for this offense. And Wayne, Jared Wayne's just he's going to do what he does, and we're going to get to there's going to be a point in almost every game where you just say, man, Jared Wayne's a really good player. Because that was the case last year, right? Every week, you would forget about it because we talk about Jordan Addison, we talk about Lucas Krull, and then Jared Wayne would step up and make some big play. Every week, you'd be like, oh yeah, Jared Wayne is he's a really strong player. And he's going to do that, I think, week after week after week. When the depth chart comes out, I think you'll see 3 starters listed. I think it'll be Jared Wayne. I think it'll be Konate Mumpfield, Bub Means, Jared Wayne, and you'll have Jalen Barden listed behind Mumpfield, probably Bradley listed behind either Wayne or Means, and then somebody else. I'm not sure who they would throw in as the 6th guy, but those 5 are all gonna play a lot. Mumpfield's gonna be the number 1 receiver on this team, but they're all gonna play a lot. They're all gonna contribute a lot. And again, not gonna say that it's better. Not gonna say the receiver room is better than it was last year, but I think it'll be pretty good. I think it'll be enough to be a real threat in the passing game, particularly if they develop the running game. They can get some play action going, which wasn't an element last year. Get some play action going, and they're going to be able to attack. I think they're going to be a pretty dangerous passing game. So that's our review of the quarterbacks, running backs, receivers. Unless there's breaking news or something, and maybe even if there is, tomorrow we're going to break down the O-line and the tight ends. And we'll just keep going day after day, Monday through Friday, with this Morning Pit. I hope you enjoy it. Remember, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com, and then come over to the website, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com, to talk about it. Talk about everything that we write about, all the news, analysis, interviews, everything like that. Come talk about it on the message boards at Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. We'll be back tomorrow morning, Wednesday, with another Morning Pit, and then we'll have our Wednesday night show at 8:30, the Panther Lair Show, which we always do right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. That way you'll never miss a live stream. You'll never miss a new video that we put out, and you'll always be on top of everything. Thanks for checking out the Morning Pit today. Looking forward to doing this every day. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We'll talk to you tomorrow.